Buongiorno a tutti e benvenuti al nostro terzo webinar dedicato alla Expo Cina. Oggi affronteremo una tematica molto importante, soprattutto per coloro che devono esportare in questo mercato, relativa ovviamente alla sicurezza delle strutture e ovviamente dei mobili in Cina. La nuova normativa GB 28008 andrà a sostituire la precedente normativa dal 1 luglio 2025 e ovviamente sarà cogente per coloro i quali dovranno esportare in questo mercato. Il webinar di oggi sicuramente si pone come un riferimento, vuole essere un riferimento non solo informativo ma anche tecnico per permettere di esplorare a fondo i dettagli normativi che riguardano una vasta gamma di settori merceologici. Pertanto parleremo di arredo ufficio, arredo domestico come letti pieghevoli, letti a castello, fino ad arrivare a tematiche più delicate, un pochino più settoriali, legate ovviamente all'arredamento con vetro, quindi tutto ciò che riguarda la regolamentazione nella posizione di vetri ovviamente all'interno di mobili. Come sapete la nostra attività è ormai da anni legata, impegnata a supportare le aziende per quel che riguarda l'export, soprattutto per quelle aziende che ovviamente vogliono approcciarsi, affrontare il mercato globale, nello specifico oggi parleremo del mercato cinese, e questo lo facciamo attraverso consulenze specifiche atte a produrre certificazioni dedicate per il mercato in oggetto e ovviamente anche certificazioni attraverso i laboratori accreditati. Oggi abbiamo la possibilità di ascoltare attraverso i nostri specialist quello che le aziende dovranno produrre e dovranno fare al fine di approcciare al mercato cinese. Ovviamente il nostro supporto vuole accompagnare le aziende in tutte le fasi del processo produttivo, fin dalla progettazione fino alla certificazione dei prodotti. Ovviamente questo per affrontare al meglio le sfide di un mercato competitivo come quello cinese. Non mi dilungo oltre, oggi parleremo con il nostro specialist Ming Chu, il quale ci darà una panoramica, credo, più ampia, più vasta possibile in materia di certificazione nel mercato cinese e pertanto passo a lui la parola. Buon ascolto a tutti quanti.
Hello everyone, thank you for coming to this webinar. Today we are talking about export to China, new standards for the furniture sector, and practically the latest safety-related standards regarding the furnitures under the standard name of GB 28008/2024. It is called actually the technical specification for the safety of furniture structure. So basically, if you are trying to bring furniture products into the Chinese market, they need to meet the basic requirements of mandatory standards, go through testing and get the necessary test reports. And this kind of tests are usually done by qualified labs in China, as you probably know. And the test reports are super important for providing compliance when dealing with customers or market inspectors. And back to the standards, the GB 28008. It is a newly introduced mandatory standards for the furniture safety in China, and all furniture products entering the Chinese market must adhere to the technical requirements outlined in this standards. And also, like a side note, for China's standard system, basically what we have or we can recognize is the system on the national level, the standard system on the national level. It consists of voluntary standards and mandatory standards for sure. And then if it's a mandatory standards, we can tell it from the standard name because it will generally start with GB and with no others, and then following with a number. And if it's a voluntary standards, it will generally start with the letter GB slash and the letter T, alphabet T. So those are actually the standards that are voluntarily required for all the manufacturers or stakeholders. So basically, for all kinds of GB standards which are mandatory in the China market for the corresponding product, it's a majority of them is regarding the safety or the security. So this is actually like one of the critical benchmark for the current Chinese SDOs to establish or to formulate standards if they want to do mandatory ones. So because it is very critical, it's related to the public safety, security, and all the stakeholders, operators that or users that may connect or involved with the product. So in today's webinar, we are going to give you a full picture of what are the technical requirements of these standards are. But before that, let's take a look at the standard frame, let's say, the standard structure of the Chinese mandatory standards regarding the furniture product. So you can see that the existing standard system of China for the furniture products consists of 4 categories: general safety, harmful substances control, flame retardant, and children's furniture specifically. But actually the system is going through a, let's say, a change or integration. So we can see that the new GB for all furniture structure safety, which is exactly the standard that we are going to talk about, it's actually merged from 6 previously drafted mandatory standards. This I need to emphasize is that these 6 standards in the general safety structure here, they are still effective today, before this new one is kicking into the implementation. But they will be combined, and it will be the specific requirements will be streamlined into more precise and practical ones. And then there are actually potentially 3 other Chinese mandatory standards for the furniture, which probably are under drafting or just undergoing in the process for revision or like merging. So we can see that. And so again, to summarize, on the left side, we can see the current Chinese furniture mandatory standard structure. And then on the right side, those are the, streamlined standard system for the Chinese furniture products. And then again, today we are going to talk about the very important mandatory standards for the furniture structure safety, which is the GB 28008. So in general, it actually covers both general structural safety requirements for furniture and specific safety requirements for certain products. It's applied to all furniture except for infant and children's furniture, and it will go into effect on July 1st, 2025, meaning, again, combining with the previous slides, we can see that once starting from July 1st of 2025, these new standards will replace the previous 6 standards, which are currently effective, but they won't last for a longer time. So this is a standard that definitely worth stakeholders to dig into. And once it's active, we actually, again, released all the standards that will be replaced by this very safety standards here for your reference. So you can check if your product was, compliant with any of them before. There might be like an impact or some potential changes that you need to do in order to keep the compliant. So again, this means the GB 28008 standards will become the go-to standard for ensuring structural safety across most types of furniture in China. And back to the specific contents that this structure contains. Its main technical requirements is actually divided into two parts. The first part is the general requirements, which consists of 3 subcategories. And then the second part is the product-specific requirements that consists of 6 subsections. And again, we will go through them one by one to give you a further information on it. So speaking of the first point regarding the general structure safety, what we need to focus in 3 points. So first of all, for edges and corners of furniture products, all those that people can touch during normal use should be rounded, chamfered, sanded, or otherwise protected to avoid any risks. So the rounding should have a radius of at least 0.5 millimeters. And there are 2 additional notes, where 2 additional points that we need to be aware is that, first of all, areas like the edges of seat surfaces and spots within 120 millimeter inward from the other edges, for example, like the backrest, armrests, or underside of the seat, usually places fingers can easily reach. And the second point is that for tables, areas like the table surface, any part under the tabletop that's less than 500 millimeters from the edge is likely to touch your knees or arms. So these are actually like specific definitions that the standard is actually given to define what kind of like roundings or like edges or corners that should follow this kind of requirement. And the second point is the joints on fixed parts should be secure. So there shall not have any looseness like missing pieces, exposed nails, or protruding nails. And additionally, the third point is that other surfaces should also be smooth, with no sharp edges or corners to ensure safety during the regular use. And then we comes to another specifically 4 points under the general structure safety, where we can see that, so speaking of vertical movable parts that are positions more than 50 millimeter above the closure point, it must stay in place and not move on their own. And for sliding components, they should have anti-detachment devices or warning labels. And the warning text must be bold font and with no smaller than size 5. And the standard actually give an example. You can see from the slide is that sliding components, including drawers, keyboard trays, and pull-out baskets, they are within the scope, and they should follow the point E. And then for products with casters other than chairs, there must be at least 2 casters that can be locked or 2 non-caster supporting legs to ensure stability during normal use. And last point of this sector, during the stability test specified in the corresponding product standard, the product must remain stable and not tip over. That's actually all of the general structure safety part. And then we will move to the safety at shear and squeeze points. You can see from this chart where for the requirements, it actually means that furniture designs need to follow these specifications. And as you know, all kinds of designs are becoming more and more creative, and the function and structures are getting more diverse. But with that comes a variety of safety risks. So this part is actually showing the guidance or the requirements on what are the bottom line or the benchmark. So especially one of the major concern is like the share and the squeeze point. So basically down to the practical point, this standard specifically address the share and squeeze point in 3 common situations, where during placement, adjustment, and folding, and when influenced by driving mechanisms and during regular use. So this chapter, its goal is to reduce the risk of users getting pinched or cut by the product. And on this page, we can see some very specific requirements. So first of all, for the 3 scenarios that we just defined, the first one, during placement, adjustment, or folding, we can see the requirements is that if the user can control their actions and stop applying force immediately under feeling pain, the presence of shear or squeeze points in components is acceptable. And this clause actually applies to all the other cases except for point B, the second one, and point C, the third one. And then for the second point, which is the scenario under the influence of driving mechanisms. So furniture components operated by driving mechanisms, for example, like mechanical springs, gas springs, etc., they shall not have accessible shear or squeeze points, and gaps created by the operation of driving mechanisms must either be less than 7 mm or greater than 18 mm, as verified using a hemispherical finger probe. And then we're going down to the third scenario, which is during use. So under normal use conditions, the standard requires that there shall be no accessible shear or squeeze points. And during the typical actions like moving a chair by lifting the seat or adjusting the backrest, etc., shear or squeeze points that could cause injury must not exist. They are forbidden. So, and then accessible gaps under applied force must either be less than 7 mm or greater than 18 mm, as verified using a hemispherical finger probe. So the figure at the bottom of the slide shows the design of the hemispherical finger probe used for gap testing as a reference. So after introducing the specific and the practical technical contents of the section, here we summarize a chart for determination of compliance of shear or squeeze point. So when we're trying to check if the furniture is compliant and regarding the shear or squeeze point under different working conditions, the first question we need to ask is that are there any shear or squeeze points at all? So if no, great, the furniture is totally compliant on this point. And if yes, then we need to move on to the next step, asking can those shear or squeeze points actually be touched? And then if the answer is no, then the product again is compliant under this section. And if yes, we need to go deeper, ask the next question, which is, does the furniture have a driving mechanism? And then if the answer to this question is yes, then there's an issue because it means basically your product does not comply with the requirements of the standards so you need to adjust. And if it's no, then let's ask when those shear or squeeze points can be contacted. So the next question, are they only contacted during the placement or folding? If yes, we need to check if the edges and corners meet compliance requirements specified in the standard. And if the answer to this item is still yes, then the product's congratulations, it is compliant. But if the answer is no, it means sorry, this product does not conform with the stipulations of the standards under this section, you need to change something. And then the other question is that, are they only contacted during use? If yes, then we need to check that does the shear or the squeeze point appear under load or body weight? So the answer, if it's positive, is a positive yes, then again, unfortunately, that means the product is not conformed with the requirements. And if no, it's totally fine, and you don't need to worry about this section as well. So the whole process actually was specified in the Annex A of the standards with further details, where if you are interested in it, you can check. And then now we'll move to the third part or subsection of the first bigger part. It's regarding the safety at holes and gaps. And in this part, for rigid parts that people can touch, we need to know if there are holes or gaps deeper than 10 millimeters. If so, then they need to follow these rules. So a 7 millimeter finger probe should not be able to pass through if 30 N of the force is applied. And a 12 millimeter finger probe should be able to pass through without using any force. So if open pipe ends do not meet this first rule, and then they have to be sealed. And for headboards, footboards, and safety rails, you need to measure the gaps between blocking components. Use the method in section 6.3 of the standards under the name GB/T 24430 of the, actually it's the 2023 version. We actually put the standard name here. It is called the text method for bunk bed structure safety. So the gap between the two blocking components in the same direction must be between 60 millimeters and 75 millimeters, no more and no less. So that will be all for the first big chapter of the standards, and the next part we're going to introduce some of the specific requirements in chapter 2 of the standards, where they actually list out 6 categories of products with very specific requirements. And the first one is the specific requirements of office partition. So in this part, we need to, first of all, emphasize or put our focus on the stability. So the partition shouldn't tip over when tested using the method in sections 6.3 or 6.4 of GBT 22792.3, the third part of the standards. And the standard is issued in 2008. Here I actually want to add a point, is that we actually brief you with how to recognize or tell which one is Chinese national mandatory standards from voluntary standards. It seems easy, but there is actually like a very interesting part or a tip that I think it is quite necessary to brief you, is that for some of the Chinese voluntary standards, they can become actual mandatory for certain products. So here we can see like an example is that because in this Chinese mandatory standard for structure safety, it actually stipulates that the way to measure or to test to prove that the product is compliant with its stipulations is the method is listed, or let's say is integrated in another standard, which seems to be a Chinese voluntary standard, GB/T. But in this case, once this Chinese voluntary national standard is cited by a law, a regulation, or a mandatory standard like this, it, at least the cited part or articles will become an actual mandatory requirement for this specific scope of products. So you need to be very careful. It means that not all of the Chinese voluntary standards can be ignored or to I can obey it or not. No, it's not the case. You need to make sure, besides the Chinese mandatory standards that your product category falls into, you need to also make sure that you have you also have all the actual practical mandatory standards listed, which appears to be a voluntary standard and starts with a GB/T. And so for this kind of work, actually, I think you might need a partner or third-party service provider like TPS, so that who actually have very abundant experience and can help you to identify such standards within their expertise. So that's the tip. And we will go back to the second point under this sector for the requirements of office partition is the structure integrity. So when tested as per section 6.5 of the same standards that we mentioned above, which is a voluntary standard, no parts should come loose and the structure shouldn't get damaged. And in regards of the Zamboli strengths, it is actually required that when tested under the section 6.6 of the standards, the assembled partition should stay stable, whether or not it has, regardless whether it has attachments, and no parts, connectors, or components should break, and there shouldn't be any bending or loosening that would affect the safety or how the partition works. And the next part is regarding the specific requirements for folding flip-up bed. We actually put a picture here. It is quite commonly seen in China for like small apartments or like as a guest house or like the guest room of a bigger apartment. So it is quite commonly seen in China. Considering the high apartment cost, that's if you want to buy a house. And so this then is for this kind of product, it actually stipulates requirements in 5 areas, including like folding accessories, the installation of folding parts and frames, unintentional closure, unintentional opening, and the installation of folding flip-up beds. So it simulates the real-world usage to identify safety risks and sets safety requirements based on international standards and the actual conditions of the furniture industry in China. So the goal here is to reduce safety risks for this type of product. And we will go, next slide, starting from next slide, we'll go deeper into the requirements of these 5 areas. So regarding folding accessories, when a folding mechanism goes through the cyclic test described in the standard GB/T 26172.2, which is the second part of this standard series, in its section 5.4, the difference in the force required to open and close it after 100 cycles and 10,000 cycles must not be more than 20%. And then for the installation of folding parts and frames, the folding mechanism has to be securely attached to a building or another framework, and it shouldn't become loose during use after testing as per, again, the same standard listed in the part A for folding accessories. The fasteners must stay tight without loosening. And speaking of unintentional closure, and it requires that when the product is tested according to, again, the same voluntary standards, specifically according to its section 5.53, foldable parts must not close on their own, and the supporting device device should not lift off the ground by more than 5 millimeters. And now this is actually like the fourth area that this chapter is referring to is more specifically with lots of requirements. Let's take a look at them one by one. So regarding the unintentional opening, there are actually quite a lot of different requirements. The first one is that the foldable part should automatically close if it's opened within 150 millimeters from the top edge, and when it's tested under, again, the same standards that we mentioned in the previous slide, according to a section 5.5.4, the force applied at the designated loading point as measured in the same standards, according to the section 5.3. It must be greater than 250 N, and the opening force, measured according to the same standards again, must be at least 20 N. So it means if it's a folding flip-up bed, it must have a locking mechanism that keeps it securely closed. This mechanism should only be opened with a manual safety device like a key or a dual action button. So the locking mechanism must require at least 50 N of force to operate. For parts that rotate, the force should be applied tangentially to the rotation axis and as far from the axis as possible. Coming up, still the unintentional opening requirements is that when tested under the same voluntary standards, section 5.4, the opening torque of a folding flip-up bed at a 17-degree position must not exceed 10 N per meter as measured using 5.3. In the following conditions, if the following conditions are met, opening torque at the 70-degree position can go up to 60 N per meter and or 120 N per meter for gravity-controlled folding beds. And the opening conditions are: the bed should automatically close when the opening length reaches 250 millimeters. The load during the opening process must stay below 100 N. And then speaking of the closing conditions on the other side, for beds that rotate around an end axis, the closing length to the automatic closing point is not more than 350 millimeters. For beds that rotate around a side axis, this length is not more than 300 millimeters. And finally, the opening torque must stay under 60 N per M or 120 N per M for gravity-controlled folding wall beds. And now still we continue and come to the final areas that stipulate the requirements on the folding flip-up bed. It's the installation of the product. And so this product needs to be, in this section, it needs to come with all the necessary fasteners and installation instructions to set up the folding flip-up bed properly. So the fastening devices should be designed so that they're not affected by floor sinking more than 15 millimeters actually, like what might happen with carpets or soft floors where they sink in. So these fasteners should meet the earlier requirements for installation of folding parts and frames, or use other safety devices with the same level of reliability. Also, there shouldn't be any looseness in the fastening devices. And next part, we are talking about the lab furnitures. So they're mostly, let's say, different kinds of products, and we will go through them one by one. So for workbenches and storage cabinets, here are the safety requirements. So this kind of products mean to hold liquids. which are meant to hold liquids, they need to have a backsplash at the edge of the surface, and this backsplash should be securely attached with no gaps or misaligned joints. So it means if you pour water into the groove between the surface and the backsplash, it shouldn't leak for at least 24 hours. And any extendable part like drawers or shelves that weighs more than 10 kilo, including what it holds. And it should be able to handle a pulling force of 200 N applying at the handle without coming loose. So if it can't achieve these requirements, there should be a warning label on the front to indicate that it could detach. And for freestanding workbenches, need a barrier strip at least 13 millimeters high along the back and open edges of regent racks or shelves to keep them secure. So for workbenches with drawers or cabinet doors, the front edge of the surface should be beveled or designed to drain the liquids. So this will prevent spills from dripping into the cabinet below. And lastly, the joints on the work surface must be smooth and tight, and if you pour water on the joints, there shouldn't be any leaks after 24 hours. And the next part, we will come to talk about the bathroom furniture. And there are different kinds of this kind of furniture. So we go through it one by one. And for hanging cabinets, or racks. The rules are based on the standard, the voluntary standards named GB/T 24977 2024. And here's what the standard is actually saying. So if the cabinet is less than 1000 millimeter high from the floor, it must pass the test with no looseness in the body or the connections. Plus, the connection points shouldn't show any cracks, deformation, or damage. And then if the cabinet is 1000 millimeter or higher from the floor, it also needs to pass the test without looseness. On top of that, shelves, supports, and brackets must stay undamaged. The shelves shouldn't tilt or fall, and the connection points still needs to be free of rack, deformation, or damage. And then for another bigger category of this kind of products, for electrical appliance and switches, for electrical appliance on furniture, they need to follow the rules stipulated in GB 4706, the part 1. And this is the standard for household electrical appliance safety. And so the switches should also be installed in places where they are safe from splashes, like on a wall outside area where the doors would open. Okay, and then the next part, we're talking about the bunk bed. For bunk beds, they're actually like, we can see most quality issues happen when things like safety rails, bed base stability, fasteners, and other areas related to the furniture for infants and children. So these issues can lead to serious risks like users falling from the upper bunk or getting their limbs stuck, which pose a significant threat to safety. And in order to address these high-risk concerns, this standards actually has set very specific rules targeting these key problems and to significantly reduce the safety risks. And so we will take a look at them in the next part, where we start with a bed base. It has a few key safety requirements on it. So first, when tested according to the standard listed here, the gap between the bed base and the edges on both sides and ends should not be more than 25 millimeter. And then the bed base also needs to be breathable. The gap between parts like slats or springs must be less than 75 millimeter. And during testing, the bed base and its components shouldn't show any sign of breaking, bending, or coming apart. These include static load test, impart resistance test, and durability test under the several sections of the GB/T 24430, which is the standard we listed here. And in short, the bed base needs to stay strong, stable, and safe during all the required tests. And on these slides, we can see the requirements on three different perspectives. First of all, the stability for the bunk bed. The product must not tip over when tested according to the standard listed here. And the relevant section is actually 6.4.13 regarding the stability test. And for the requirements of fasten of upper and lower beds, it's the upper and lower parts of the bed must stay securely connected when tested under the same standards, which is actually stipulated under the section 6.4.14, which specifically deal with fastening stress test. And then for the access route and ladders, the products must meet the safety requirements outlined in GB 28007 2004 version, and there are two sections that actually related with it, which will cover technical specifications for infants and children's furniture. And next part, we move to the sixth category regarding the glass furniture. So glass furniture is quite unique, and if it breaks due to the quality issues, and then it would be very easily cause serious injuries like cuts and bleeding, or even threatening lives and property. So this standards were developed through research by experts and the drafting team to ensure safety in four key areas that is showing here. And we will go through them one by one again. And these measures aims to improve product safety at the technical standard level, ensuring product quality and protecting consumers' rights. So the table here, first of all, we're talking about the safety requirements for glass dimensions. It's the table we summarize here is actually outlines the thickness and area requirements for glass furniture. It provides guidelines based on three types of glass: tempered glass, semi-tempered glass, and flat glass, along with their applications, framing styles like framed or frameless or semi-frameless, and the intended uses. So this is actually a very technical very technical data, and I think it's because it refers to different kinds of products. I will just leave it here, and I think all the stakeholders or manufacturers can match their product technical specification into this table if their products falls within the scope. So but additionally, it's worth noting that frameless and semi-frameless flat glass is not allowed to be used in any load-bearing glass components and movable decorative components. So besides, if flat glass is used as materials for non-floor standing doors, the bottom edge of the glass must be at least 1.3 meters above the ground. And then, speaking of the safety requirements for the assembly of the glass components within the glass furniture, let's see, there are still abundant different requirements. So glass parts in the product must be free of cracks or chipped edges, and exposed edges needs to be treated to prevent injuries. And for tempered, semi-tempered, and laminated glass, here are the rules about the chipped edges. So each of the edges, each piece of the glass can have at most one chipped edge per meter, and the chip can't be longer than 10 millimeters. And the depth of the chip going from the glass edge toward the surface must be no more than 2 millimeters. And if the chip extends from the surface into the thickness of the glass, it must not go deeper than 1/3 of the glass thickness, and only one such chip is allowed per panel. So there also needs to be a 1 to 2 millimeter thermal expansion gap between the glass and any surrounding parts. And last, probably but not the least, if the furniture has lighting fixtures on its structural components or shelves, film-coated and laminated glass can't be used in those areas. This is to prevent the glass from overheating when the lights are on. And speaking of the round holes in the tempered and semi-tempered glass requirements, we can see that the edge of the round holes in glass must be smooth, as required by the standard, with no burrs or defects that could cause injury. And for decorative holes that fingers can reach into, the diameter of the hole must be larger than 20 millimeters. And when it comes to the position of the round holes, here are the rules. 3 of them. The distance from the edge of the hole to the edge of the glass A must be at least twice the thickness of the glass, first thing first. And then the distance between the edges of the 2 holes, as shown in B, must also be at least twice the thickness of the glass. And the distance from the edge of the hole to the corner of the glass C, as shown in the picture, must be at least 6 times the thickness of the glass D, as shown in the picture. And if the distance from the edge of the hole to the corner is less than 35 millimeters, the hole cannot be placed symmetrically relative to the corner. And then the fourth part of the requirements of the glass furniture, we will talk about the structural strengths. And it actually contains quite a few requirements. And again, we'll go through them one by one. So for floor standing doors, where glass is the main material, only tempered glass or laminated tempered glass can be used. And the tempered glass used for load-bearing parts must pass the drop ball impact test based on the Annex D of a national standards, voluntary, GBT 32446, and without any damage. And after testing the fragmentation state of the tempered glass, load-bearing parts must meet the standards in section 5.6 of the standard GB 15763.2. And you also need to be aware that laminated glass doesn't need fragmentation test. And both tempered glass and laminated tempered glass load-bearing parts must also pass the shot bag impact test from the Annex D of the aforementioned national voluntary standards with no damage. Again, so all these listed standards, voluntary ones although, but they will be, again, mandatory standards in regards of the compliance of the product when it fits within the scope that listed here. And continue with the structural strength requirements. We can see that the other requirements would include, for tempered glass, the surface stress must be at least 90 MPa after the testing based on the Annex D of the standards. And for semi-tempered glass, like float glass or coated glass, the surface stress must be between 24 to 60 MPa after testing. And load-bearing tabletops made from any types of glass must pass the impact resistance test listed in the Annex D without any damage, while floor standing glass doors must pass the sandbag impact test from the Annex D without showing any damage. So that will be all for the technical requirements. And here we are giving you some guidance or like suggestions for compliance. So 3 points to summarize. So first of all, is the test reports is probably the best proof of compliance. So since this mandatory standards has not yet been adopted by any certification schemes, test reports in accordance with this mandatory standards currently serve as the sole documentation demonstrate compliance. And qualified labs for testing, in theory, any lab with a CMA, which is the China Metrology Accreditation Certificate in this field, can perform tests according to these very mandatory standards. However, to ensure a broader recognition of the test report, it is recommended to select a national level accredited accredited lab to conduct the test. And then speaking about the designated testing organization, at present, we need to make you aware that China Testing and Certification International Group, which is shortly called as CTC, they are the only organization in China that has obtained the national level qualification to conduct the tests specified in this very mandatory standards for certain furniture types like a general furniture, lab furniture, and bathroom furniture. So this information can be found on the China's State Administration for Market Regulations National Certification and Accreditation Information Public Service platform. And of course, more labs are expected to obtain national level qualification in the future. But currently, again, this is the only one that are qualified. And to give you more information, we were actually putting more details on this page regarding CTC for your reference. First of all, let's see sample requirements. They basically would just require one sample per model per batch if you want to test it. And the duration would be within 3 natural weeks, which is 15 working days if there's no national holidays to interrupt. But this time period, we should note that it is excluding the time for delivering samples and other related processes, especially for the overseas manufacturers if they deliver the sample overseas via import and export. That probably will require quite a few days. And the cost will be around 100 euros for each test items. For example, like share and squeeze points or electronic appliances and the switches. So the process, I think it would be like any other certifications or like testings all around the world. It basically would we contact the test laboratory and provide a product manual and then submit required samples, and they conduct the necessary test and then finally issue the test report for the party that assigned them to do the test. Most importantly, information that we need to aware is that CTC is basically like a Chinese locally based, although it's a large group, but it's basically Chinese locally based, and not many of their employees, especially like the technicians, would speak English or any other foreign language. So this is where the point where that we would suggest you apply to a reliable and professional partner like TPS to get in touch with the CTC and to ensure that all the information exchange is credible and fluent. And that will be all for the webinar. And thank you again for coming and listening to our presentations. Here we put some contact information of our company for you to see, and in case of any requirements or questions, we'll always welcome you to reach out to us. And again, thank you for your attention, and hope you have a great day, and hope this presentation will inspire you a little bit regarding the Chinese technical requirements on furnitures. And we hope we can see you later. Thank you.